grab your coffee and get cozy because you are listening to Fika with Vicky, live from home.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fika. With our guest today, author Benjamin Stimpson, and me, your host, Vicky Bennison. Ben is the hero of my story today because he stepped in with very short notice to fill in for Rachel Patterson, which will be with us another time. And I'm glad he did because Ben has been on my mind lately for reasons we'll get to in a bit. And when he popped up to say hello last week, I was like, I want to finish this conversation past hello. There's things I need to know, Ben. So I knew I would be inviting him back. Ben is the author of Ancestral Whispers and the to be released of Doves and Ravens. He is involved in academic folklore and history studies and uses this in his writing and psychotherapy practices. He is a podcaster, a guest speaker attending many conferences, and recently a person who made their dream come true. And that is what I'm eager to hear about. Though the books and stuff are interesting too. Welcome to Fika, Ben.
Hello, it's good to see you again, Victoria. It's been like 18 months since we last sat down, I think. Now.
I know.
Something.
It was like August, September of 23. Right.
Yeah, so about 18 months. Almost it can't. Yeah. Is all 2 years ago? I can't.
Almost 2 years ago. No, I can't believe how quickly time is going. It's like, and then we're here. And then we're here. And then you were just talking about your dream of moving from Canada to the UK. And now you're talking to me from the UK.
From the UK, I know.
How does that happen, weird. Ben? Lots of people talk about doing these things like just packing up and moving on. Yeah. But you actually did it. What are the hows, the whys, how did you do it, Ben?
This is the thing. People have been asking me because I you get the idea in your head you want to go to another country, and it's like the movies make it look like it's simple. You just get on a plane, you just live your lovely life in Paris. But I'll be honest with you, I put a lot of work into this. This is something that I've pined for literally since I was about 15 years old and dreading living in Canada. I came here 15 years ago when I was about 22, 23, and I worked here for a summer. So I worked down on the south coast and then flew home to Canada. And ever since then, I have just been like, I want to go back to the UK. I want to go back to the UK. So solidly, I've been working towards this. I've been kind of getting my life stuff done in Canada, finishing my bachelor's, training, trying to build a practice. So I started 2 years ago trying to build my psychotherapy practice here in the UK. I started to transition myself over there. I got myself signed up with associations. I started to build clients over here. And 2 years ago, I moved in with my parents in Cwrt-y-Cadno, Ontario, and to save money, and then I just worked towards it. So a lot of groundwork, a lot of figuring out kind of what I really wanted, and I had originally wanted to move about 18 months ago, but a lot of credit card debt kept me back in Canada, and after paying that off, now I'm here. So a lot of work.
So you were originally born in Wales, right?
I was,
and so you had that longing to always go back.
Yeah.
You felt that you fit in more. It was more of a Ben place.
Yeah. It's strange though, because so I was born in Wales. My mum and dad are from Manchester originally, and they moved to North Wales in the 80s. I was born over there, and I lived for 8.5 years in North Wales. And I was about 2.5 weeks ago, I was staying in Wales, just literally south of where I'm from over there, and stayed with some lovely friends of mine. And, the landscape was so familiar. Of course, 15 years ago, I'd spent a month in the area too, so I was quite familiar with there. And for such a long time, I felt like I didn't belong in Ontario. I didn't feel connected to place. I didn't feel connected to Hanover and to Wyerton and to, Hamilton and all these places I'd lived, Kitchener. Although I did enjoy living in Kitchener. So I realize now actually how North American I am in many ways and how connected I am actually to that place,
So you're just always in the wrong place at the wrong time.
This is the thing. I think anybody who is an immigrant and has lived in another place for such a long time can appreciate this teaching, which is that the immigration experience is always stepping out of and never stepping in. You step into somewhere new, but you're still an outsider. You step back into where you came from. You're an outsider again, right? So it's finding that liminal space.
I just want to take a minute to say good morning, Robin. Thanks for joining us today. Yeah, no, I think that's completely right. And even for those of us whose ancestors moved, not just our parents, our ancestors moved, and we've never been back to that country. I still feel like there is a connection there that we are missing. I remember doing a show with an Indigenous gentleman for the library. They were doing a lot of activities there. And when he started talking about, this is our land, I stand on, for generations, I got this chill because I thought, I don't have that. And I think that we're orphans, land orphans in a bit, because we don't really, even after all of this time, centuries for some people, we don't still see how we fit in. So I get, we still have that missing something. We don't even know what it is when we're sitting there. But that is a topic for Ancestral Whispers. We're on their dreams. So so we're talking about emotions here. Did you find it much more of an emotional journey or an actual physical journey? Like how much were the
it's been both.
Yes.
Oh, it's been both. Yeah. The physical journey is somewhat over. I've landed. I'm kind of staying in a place. I'm going to be here at least for the next 6 months or so. But the emotional journey is an everyday journey, and I'm still on that journey right now. I won't lie. Nothing can prepare you fully for the point of moving, right? I thought I knew because I've already done this when I was 8. But what happened to me when I was 8 was unprepared. It caused a lot of damage to me, and that wasn't an intentional damage. My parents didn't intentionally be like, we're going to move country and cause trauma for our children. They didn't do that, right?
No.
They were very no. But unfortunately, culture shock is a big thing, and I would be somewhat of a pompous hypocrite if I could sit here and tell you and explain to you what the culture shock I'm dealing with right now is, as though I'm already over it. I'm really waist deep, elbows deep into it. And every day over the past 2 weeks, I've had really rough days, and I've had really beautiful days, and I've had wonderful days, and I've had really shocking days. And I think that it takes some time. It's an adjustment, right? Things that I thought that would cause me issues actually feel so blatantly normal, right? Things that I thought that I would do, like, for example, when I'm with my roommates or with my friends over here, and they're all British, they're all my British people, right? I thought that I would have a harder time with that. I thought that I would feel like I don't belong, and so I needed to prove to people that I belong here. But that was only for a few days that I would mention I'm from Canada. Now it's so in the background because I'm normalizing my life here. I'm doing the things like going to Tesco's, going to get groceries, going to, see movies with friends, grabbing a coffee and just chatting. And yet other times it's shocking because it's like, the weight of all of the admin stuff and all the things and, all trying to change over just to a whole different kind of system. In Ontario, we have, our SIN cards, we have our, the CRA we're dealing with. We have, costs. We know what costs are. We know, what the rules of the road, right? And everything's like different over here in that way. So it's kind of like catching up. It almost feels like being 18 and having to suddenly, and suddenly having to think about paying taxes, or like voting, or things that you wouldn't do when you were a child. So I hope that's not
Have
too much,
you
Victoria.
tried? No. Well, have you tried driving on the wrong side of the road? On the wrong side, the correct side. See what I said there?
No, I haven't. No.
The British side of. I'm thinking that would be terrifying for me. Like just that one little thing.
So I've been a passenger quite a few times over here. I am really blessed that I have a load of friends that I have really connected with over the past few years, and that was intentional on my part. I wanted to make connections over here. So the other day a friend came down from an hour away and picked me up, and we went to a local stone circle. And I mean, he's been over here. He's originally from the States, but he's been over here now since 1992. So like, he is more British than I am, right? But driving on the other side of the road isn't the issue. It's the way that people drive. So because the roads are so narrow, oftentimes if you're going down, and a lot of the roads are single lane, you're having to stop to allow another vehicle to come through, or to duck around parked cars. The space that we have on our roads in Ontario and most of North America, I'd say, is massive by comparison to over here. So it's just a way of driving that's different. Now, that being said, like, I don't think it'll take too long to get into that notion. But that's been a little off-jarring. That's been, or like how people park, because people are parking on the sidewalks as opposed to in the road, because there's no place to in the road, because it's usually one lane. So it's like, okay, we're going to have to walk and jimmy around cars that are parked right on the sidewalk. That's been jarring, Yeah.
No, it's all. So I know. So as a person who has spent a lot of her life watching BBC, PBS comedy nights, I know that you like keeping up appearances, the mystery shows. Oh, that's something. Do you fear for your life if when entering a small village?
No, not in the small villages. The town centers, yes, but not the small villages.
Because they're always, it just amazes me how many ways one can meet their demise in like Midsummer Mysteries or whatever.
I know, right?
So, but my question is, do you feel that any of that helps with making such an adjustment, like to acquaint yourself through the popular culture?
Not the older stuff. Definitely the popular culture, though. Yes. So, like the other night we had Eurovision on, and Eurovision is huge over here. Now, it's not something that I grew up with, because we left before Eurovision was on. I remember baking on television, but it's just not a thing in Canada, right? So like, I'm listening to, like, I'm just going about my night, and so is my roommate, or so is the landlady I'm renting from, and we didn't realize it was Eurovision. And then the next door neighbors, who is a lovely guy, lovely guy, but was up until about 1 o'clock in the morning with his friends, like, having Eurovision party. And so I go knock on the door, and I'm like, I'm so sorry to do this, but can you turn whatever that is down? It's like, but it's Eurovision.
Like, where are you from? Canada? You're not getting it. You're not getting it.
Yeah.
So,
I would say no. To finish that question, though, it is important.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it is. It has been very important. So, but I like, because I'm such an Anglophile, as well as being, Welsh and English and however way those identities work. Like I've kept up with the media. Like I've watched the new TV shows. I tend to listen to BBC more. I tend to listen to podcasts. For popular culture, like Loose Women every so often, right? So yeah, I would say so. Just to have those cultural scripts, you know what I mean?
Right, scripts like
Yeah.
the words, like a biscuit instead of cookie. It's not.
Well, like going into like in Ontario, we'd go into like Zayas or to I don't know, Walmart or something like that, and we'd be like, "Oh, are you having a good day? Yeah, I'm having a good day. A good day. Are you having a good day? Oh, yeah, I'm having a good day." And that would be it. Over here, it would be like moaning about the weather, or like you know. I went into this into a shop called Dunelm, which is a bit like our Home Sense, and I was with a friend, and I'm at the cashier, and I say, "Oh, it's a bit quiet in here today, isn't it?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's really quiet. I don't know what's going on," and so we have like a little bonding thing, like moaning about something about it being so quiet. And I go outside, and my friend was like, what was that?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "You've never been in there before. You don't know how quiet it is." Yeah, but it's a cultural script.
That's right.
Yeah,
We bond through
yeah,
moaning. I
yeah.
think we do that with snow to a degree.
Yeah, every culture has it, and it's so subconscious that you don't really recognize it until you're outside of a culture. Something that's been really kind of not frustrating me, but has really understood how backtrack I am. I not backtrack, like kind of old school I am, is there's certain words that we would use at home with my parents. Things like plonker, or like, oh, I can't even think what they are now. Just some like words that are 30 years out of date over here. The local slang has moved on. They just don't use those words anymore unless they're like in an old TV show, right? But they wouldn't use them. So like over here, like how like swear words, right? FUCK isn't said over here as much as CUNT. CUNT is used a lot.
I know,
over here,
and
yeah.
and that's a word I have problems with. But I forgive anyone from the UK that says it, because it doesn't have.
Yeah.
They just it's just obvious that would take a lot of getting used to for
very
people,
much so.
I think.
Yeah.
So what I think is supposed to be a practical question is, Dave would like to know: did you leave all your possessions in Canada, or did you pack them into a TARDIS and bring them back to England?
I wish that I had. I wish that I had put them into a TARDIS, because having a TARDIS will be very good. No, I managed over when I left Kitchener Waterloo, when I think we last spoke, maybe whenever it was.
Right.
So
you were in Kitchener.
So I was in Kitchener. Okay, so that was 2 years ago then. So I went through basically removing as like much of the random stuff, and I got my stuff down to 24 U-Haul boxes. 24 small 12 by 12 by 16 U-Haul boxes, and that's pretty good for me. Most of those are books, so I did have them shipped, and there's all these weird connections. So the shipping company in Toronto, the main agent who I spoke to, is originally from the town I'm living in right now. Like, he's from very close by. Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. So I went with them, picked it up middle of April, and they arrived last week. So now they're just up in like a storage unit place until I get on my feet. So, but yeah, a TARDIS would have been a much better.
So
I could fit more stuff in.
Yeah, so you're waiting until you get a permanent place to.
Because this is the thing, I don't have credit over here. I don't, and this is the.
Oh,
this
and
is
you
where
can't
it
get
feels,
up. Okay, that's a very important detail. That
it is.
It's something that we
Like
don't think about.
Well, and this is why I said, like, it feels like I'm 18, just newly an adult, and suddenly I have to build credit. I have to do this. I have to get a credit card. I have to open a bank account. I have to do all of these things. And so until I build a credit score, I won't be able to get my own place. So mostly, I mean, it looks like I won't be able to fully unpack until I'm in my own place,
So there's more. This is a continuing story saga, if you will, of
unfolding
this
story.
adventure.
Yeah. Exactly.
An unfolding story.
So, yeah.
Now, to point out, as Robin points out, I need to put his up. Maybe if my
Which one? About the fish and chips?
Oh, it's been a day of tech. Okay, so even if you're in a larger country, there can be differences in the culture. For example, Canada. I find it hard to find proper fish and chips in Edmonton, Benjamin, being from Newfoundland. And how's the food issues going?
Oh no, honestly,
Are
food has
you
been
finding things?
lovely. Yeah, no, food has been lovely. I say I was talking to a friend of mine who's from Reno, Nevada, and he comes over here because he's part of one of the spiritual groups over here, and he comes here every year. And we were just talking about like he was saying, how are you doing and stuff. And I said, I can't stop eating the bread. And he said, are you okay? Like, are you just eating bread? Do you have enough money? I said yes, but it's just so good because they don't put the same amount of sugar in the bread over here than they do in Canada and definitely the United States. So
And you
the
taste
the,
that.
the tastes are different. Things are fresher. Things taste because a lot of like the produce is either local or coming from Spain. It isn't being driven on trucks from across the continental United States, for example. So yeah, things taste fresher. Food is a lot cheaper over here. Food is a lot cheaper over here.
That's
Yeah,
surprising.
I know it
So
does.
when we,
It does surprise
I mean,
people.
I know that people vacation more, and I think,
Mm,
how do they afford to do that?
yeah.
But
It's because
then I,
costs like that are cheaper. So, like in Canada, a lot of our food is coming from the other side of the continent, right? So it's about what 7,000. I think it's about 7,000 miles from London to Toronto, and it's 5,000 miles from Toronto to Vancouver. But when you're on a tiny little island where it's just like smaller than the state of California, things that are being shipped around the country,
right,
it's
right.
faster, it's cheaper, right? Whereas if we're getting fresh groceries or like fresh imports from say China or from Mexico, that's being driven such long distances, so you're adding that cost on, right? So like to give you an idea, if you go in and buy a loaf of bread in, I don't know, like Independent for $3.99 over here, so $3.99, right? And the exchange rate is about 0.55 right now. So for every pound, it's $1.89 almost, right? You can get that same loaf of bread for £1.20.
Oh,
So about $2.40.
I find that very interesting, because then if we did get that fresher, more artisan bread, that would cost us
Mm-hmm.
even more because it's
$7, $8.
artisan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. For
yeah.
it's
Yeah. Well, I mean, you saw the picture I posted of a loaf of bread, and it's like the loaf of bread needs to calm the F down because it looks like it's just come from like a Disney movie, and it tastes amazing. So yeah,
it was.
yeah,
I don't know. I understand the importance of a good loaf of bread. It goes with
yeah,
everything, or just by itself. You can't,
yeah,
because in all those medieval Renaissance kind of stories, and then the myths, it's
yeah.
always about that bread. Right?
It
They
is.
have the
Yeah,
bread and
it
the
is. Yeah.
ale and a bowl of soup, and they live on that.
And they live on that. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's true. You can live on potatoes, milk, and bread. That will give you, like in emergency situations, like
Right.
that will give you all of the proteins and all the nutrients that you need to kind of survive off of, right? So it's it's neat,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's neat.
It's getting
Yeah,
closer. So
it
we're
is.
getting into the physical things of this, which are
Mhm.
absolutely fascinating. You need to
Yes.
give me a call. But you are a story guy,
Mhm.
and you believe in the power of the story for spiritual
Yes.
rituals and things like that. You use it in your
Yeah.
psychotherapy practice.
Yes.
Ben, is there a story? Is there a character that encouraged you on this journey that you could envision yourself of?
Um. I think there are several. Yeah, I think there are several. What's really coming to mind is that image of Paddington Bear
Oh my God, I've
coming
been
up.
in such a
Yeah,
Paddington Bear phase.
yeah.
Yes,
That
because he
image
is
of
an
Paddington Bear.
immigrant. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, and
he's an
he's on a
immigrant,
quest.
and he's got his little like when Paddington Bear first comes, and he's like trying to trudging around in London, and he's got his little suitcase, and he's everything is new to him. That is how I'm feeling. That's how I'm feeling right now. Now, I think I think it depends. It's it's an interesting question, I should say. It is no weird question. It's an interesting question because, for such a long time, I guess I was convinced that it would all be like, the ending scene where, suddenly the hero goes on his journey and then suddenly he comes back. I have this image of like Khalil Gibran's Prophet Al Mustafa.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the end. Yeah, and like watching his ship from his homeland appear to take him back home, and all of the people come and kind of a pompous way to see myself, but
No, but the story is important
yeah,
to you. The
yeah,
story is important to you, and you've lived it for
yeah.
so long.
It is, and I've spoken to friends about this. Like, what I focused on being British in Canada for so long. I focused on that identity of wanting to go home for so long, and now I've come home, and it isn't the home that I remember. So it is like coming to a new place. Things are familiar. There's
You
definitely
can't go home,
familiarity
Ben.
here. No, but none of us can.
No,
Right?
we can't even
Yeah.
go, even if we've lived in the same town or whatever.
Yeah.
We can't go back
Yeah.
to that place.
We can
And,
never go back.
it's an
No.
acceptance. Also, that you need to cheer yourself because your
Yes.
story wasn't as big to other people, except maybe me, but it's
Thank
just
you.
a part of being,
Thank you.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But what you can do is get a Paddington Bear hat
Right.
and a toggle
Well,
coat. Is that
I'll
what
show
they
you
call them?
this. This is where is it? Here we go. So I was working out of Wyerton. I was working out of Wyerton for a good 2 years, and I really felt connected with Wyerton. And I didn't realize how connected I felt to that place until I left it. And so I have my little Wyerton Willie. official. Here we go. We'll do a little.
Yes,
There
the
we go.
Wyerton
Official.
Willie.
The Wyerton
That
Willie. So, so I have seen my shadow, and I think my spring is going to be a few weeks more than I thought it would be. But yeah, I'm really connecting with Wyatt and Willie right now. So
with on a physical plane, it's a few weeks more here, so you're not missing anything.
well, this is a weird thing. I arrived, so for the past like 3.5 weeks, it has been like tropical over here. It has been 19 degrees, warm, sunny the whole time. We've had maybe 2 days where it's been overcast, and that's not typical for over here. So I posted on my Facebook page before. I was like, "Oh, the real British weather has arrived," and like my cousin and all the Brits have been like, "Yeah, we told you, don't get used to it," Yeah.
You brought it, and you took it away, and that's
yeah.
that's all that I'm saying. So Paddington Bear kind of thing, just trying to find home, trying to find your family, your home.
Yeah.
You still have your family that you care about in Ontario.
Very
but...
much so. Yeah. Very
okay,
much
so Ben has given me Rob. I'm trying to stay away from immigrants and immigrants. No, I don't try to stay away from immigrants. I try to stay away from politics. And this could be a very political leading question at this point. But I think we can do it as Ben is an immigrant popping around the world. So Robin feels that we're losing, but any country would lose its cultural identity with a lot of people coming from other countries to remember who we are. What are your thoughts on that? To remember your own culture? Because you're doing it. You went back.
Well, I would ask what we mean by we, right? Because, one of the things as an immigrant to Canada and somebody who grew up in Canada, spent 30 years in Canada, I realize how Canadian I am and became, right? I'm now almost like reverse engineering myself to fit in over here now. I'm as much an immigrant to this country as I am originally from it, right? So I think that we need to really understand that culture is constantly shifting, changing, evolving, growing, right? There are British people and English people and Welsh people, Scottish people and Irish people whose ancestors did not originate in these islands, but they are like more
They've been
more
there
British
for
than I am. Yeah,
forever. Right, right. And
absolutely, right? You know.
where do we make the cutoff? I think that we don't even understand that in history, people
Mhm.
changed, people traveled a lot more than we even think about. Okay. We
Yep.
don't give past people enough credit. I mean, they were
Yes.
over there, you know, in China trading for spices, in
Mhm.
India, in Russia, long before we gave them credit for
Mhm.
even possibly coming to North America. So what I know in northern Scotland, and the Vikings, I'll say, Scandinavian, are so intermixed because they're so close. How do you even tell where one culture began and another one? They share a lot of characteristics.
Well, this is the thing, right? And I think we need to really underline that culture is not genetic, right? And this is where I think a lot of diaspora people get it wrong, is because they assume that culture is genetic, or they think that there's a cultural resonance with genetics, that because their ancestors had a particular culture or connection to a place, therefore they have a connection to that place. And it's not. You don't. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news
The
for that.
ideas. No.
Yeah.
I'm the one that
Well,
had like land orphan. I think, but that's
yeah.
just because I want that feeling. I'm not saying it has
But
to
this is the
be
thing.
the physical feeling of standing on, but
Right.
there's so much mix up back there. It's like, okay,
There
just
is.
take
Yeah.
take me.
No, there
There's
is. There is.
Irish, there's Scottish,
Hmm.
there's Viking,
Yeah.
and down to Belgium, which, if you take that, the Vikings invaded Belgium. So who's to know which,
Hmm.
or the Belgium took over? I can't remember, but there's
Yeah.
a connection there.
Normandy. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so who I'm not going to try to talk to you. You're the history guy, the academic. I
Oof,
am not an
oof.
academic. I just go by feeling. So, who's to say that those bloodlines didn't cross then? Like, it is a mix.
But this is the thing, and this is where I really need listeners to understand, particularly in the diaspora, there, is that bloodlines don't matter when it comes to culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am originally from Wales, but I'm like, when I landed in Wrexham and I was hanging out with my Welsh people, right? There were so many things from recent Welsh culture that I had no clue about. I also don't speak Welsh, right? And that's caused a bit of frustration for me because, to some sectors in Wales, people who don't speak Welsh aren't true Welsh, right? There's a lot of it's such an interplay of different things. When I hear somebody say, my ancestors came from Scotland, Ireland, wherever over here, somewhere in Europe, right? What I hear there is a want for connection, which is huge. But you have to ask yourself, what are you actually connecting to? Are you connecting to the current culture as it is now? Or are you connecting to the idea of belonging? And I think that's what a lot of people in the diaspora are really wanting. And I certainly felt that myself. I am so, for 30 years, I pined to be back in England, back in Wales, back in Britain, because I wanted to belong, because I didn't feel like I belonged. Now that I'm over here, it's like, it isn't a case of belonging, it's a case of just get on with your life, right? You know what I mean?
Well,
I
that's
think
it.
yeah, go on, please.
I was going to say, we spend a lot of time thinking of where we belong instead of
Yeah,
just going on with life. That is the bottom.
exactly.
But
And it's
even,
life that is the culture. Culture is living, right?
and culture is shared. What I
Yeah.
think is like, on the morning when the snow has packed in your driveway, you don't
Mhm.
care who's coming to help you.
Right. Right.
That is a
Right.
shared culture. We just
Yes.
got to get it done. And
Yep.
I think that's where the phrase from
Yep.
Canada is like, doesn't
Yep.
matter how we missed the first part. Doesn't matter how much snow there is, we got to get her
Yep.
done.
Yeah,
And
exactly. You
that,
got to get her,
you know,
right? You got to get her. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
whether it's no matter what the difficulty, like I always say, when people talk about this, especially it's quite seen in the
Mhm.
spiritual community, I think.
Yes.
And I think about cities where there's all of these different cultures, and if a baby
Mhm.
is sick,
Yes.
none of those women care if it was an Irish remedy or a Jewish remedy or an
Yeah.
Italian remedy. It's like they're all working together to get this
Yes.
baby better. And
Yep, very much
so
so.
it's mixed. And so then the next generation is going to have a mix of Irish, Jewish, Italian,
Yep.
Hungarian,
Yep.
folklore and tales within them that
Yeah.
doesn't even come from but there's is so strong because they practice them, they experience them.
Yeah. It's part of the living landscape, right? When new elements come into a living landscape, the landscape and the culture of that landscape will assimilate or reject, right? And certainly, every generation has, I think every generation has struggles with incorporating new people, but it's also about keeping the culture up to date and keeping the culture vibrant and elastic and living, right? Because culture that is out of date, out of touch, out of time, it tends to get left behind, and it can actually cause damage to the new generations, right? This is why I think
especially if they're pining for that. Okay, go ahead.
Well, and this is why I think folklore is really interesting. This is what I love about the aspect of folklore that I study, is that I'm very interested in how stories change over time. Not so much just what those stories are, but how those stories are taken up by different people. And a lot of my work has been to trace stories of, like in my recent projects, which is wizards, warlocks, cunning, right? To see how the stories have evolved over a span of hundreds of years. And you can see when stories are useful to a population because it speaks still to that population versus those stories that are forgotten, right? But it's a lived landscape. So for example, bring it to Ontario here, right? Toronto of a certain period, right? You've got Kensington Market, you've got Corso Italia, you've got the old Parkdale before it became gentrified. Those had identities, those had experiences. That was the modern kind of culture of Toronto. But those places have changed now, right?
Well, because you didn't, like, for me, growing up in rural Ontario, which is a culture or whatever all on its own, going to Toronto on a school trip was like traveling the world.
Yeah.
Like the pottery and the foods and the spices, and it was just like, I don't have to travel, I just have to come to Toronto.
Totally.
And so, you pick up on a lot of things there. And I want, you were talking about stories changing. And I think that's the important thing. I think people get stuck on, which is important. I think it's good to go back to the origin of the story to see where it started. But then it does change. Even in those days, the storyteller would have, changed it for the people, what they were hunting, where they were living, the troubles of that day. Was it drought? Was it flooding? Was it whatever? The story just naturally changes. So I think that is very interesting.
Yeah.
And one more thing before I let you talk again, because I know I'm not supposed to be talking, but I'm very excited with this conversation, Ben. I was thinking, I'm close friends with Santa Claus, maybe near, but he has found it so interesting that, people see this as a Christian thing or, a white thing. And he has many visitors from like Turkey and Syria, because that's where Santa came from.
Yes.
And they have statues to him and everything. And it has just been a joyful learning experience in our household, this whole thing, and how this story has like mingled over the years.
Yeah.
Go ahead now, you can talk.
Well, and I think, again, that speaks to that that idea that folklore and story is very viral in many ways. It will adapt itself, and the culture will and the community will adapt those stories to be integrative, right, and integrated. When we, like, the story of Santa Claus is a very good example of that, right? In Turkey, he's Saint Nicholas, right? He is a saint, and his hagiography is very important to, Byzantine Christians, Orthodox Christians. But when you come into the West, you come into places like England with Father Christmas, which merged the idea of Santa Claus with, a festive spirit of Christmas. If you go up to Svalbard, up in the most northern community up in Norway, there on the Svalbard archipelago, they have a festival because one of the mines there is believed to be the actual dwelling place of Santa Claus. So they have like a little box. They have like a festival where the children come. They place their letters to Santa Claus in, and it's like in the town of Longyearbyen. There's a woman on YouTube called Cecilia Blondal, and she chronicles her life living in a cabin with her boyfriend and her dog Grim, who I love. Yeah, she has like 5 million followers, so you'll probably
yeah. And I'm always looking for that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So, but I mean, it's adaptive, right? Different parts of the world, like even in, everywhere has their local stories, and those stories may be similar to the story that's just down the road, but it's integrated and it's landed in the landscape here. You take ghost walks around, and I know you have, around Pelham or around St. Catherine's or around, Niagara Falls or wherever, right? And those ghost stories will be so remarkably similar to ghost stories further down the road. But they're your ghost stories because they're here, and they're enjoyed by everybody, right?
So it's Ben, can you go longer?
Yep.
Or you can go longer, or do you have a commitment to like?
I can go longer. Yeah, we can go longer.
Okay, if we're gonna get to the okay, so Robin wants to know, do you think cultural traditions keep people connected to their spiritual side, like Christmas traditions and stuff? Or do you think...
Yeah, so it's a big question. I think that they can do. It depends on the type of this it depends on how we're understanding spiritual. It depends on how we're understanding the difference, because a lot of cultures around the world don't have the same Western differentiation between spiritual and mundane, right? In fact, the majority of cultures outside of the West will see, and many of the cultures in the West, there are, things that are both spiritual and mundane, right? There are things that people do that is religious, but they're not state religious, right? There are little superstitions, and I don't say little in a demeaning way there, but there are practices that people do, and they may not have a kind of an understanding that this is a spiritual thing, but they do have an understanding that there's an uncanny kind of supernaturalism to them. Like, for example, anybody who's a sports fan and they have to wear their lucky socks, because if they don't, their sports team, like the Maple Leafs, who seem to never win at all,
it's a good thing you got out of Ontario.
I know, right? I know. I don't want to be linked to it, but yeah, like that magical realism piece, right, is huge. So I think that cultural traditions connect people, whether it's a spiritual or mundane way of connection is really up to the thing in question, if that makes sense.
Well, no, it does, because coming back to rural Ontario and the farming community, even though there was a lot of very conservative Christianity there, there were traditions because it was farming.
Completely.
It was the harvest. It was, and it was me understanding that's the part of the whole thing I liked.
Yes.
Going in church that sent me in other directions, but there was no. It was just habit. It was fun. It was tradition. So the traditions were kept beyond the spirituality. I
very
think.
Much so. Yeah,
I think it is.
So.
And even you can bring that in your own, like I had just hearted yours, I made it to the UK kind of post, and then you're on my thing and I'm like, no, I want to talk more about this Ben. So was
it was
that
a good timing. Yeah,
was it or that gentleman who grew up in the town that you're staying in now, that with the books, with all of that stuff, are they synchronicities? Do we just...
It's definitely a weird thing. So one of the tattoos that I have is the Web of Weird. So this is a modern stave. It was designed by a German occultist named Jan Fries, and I really love Jan's work. And the idea with this is it contains all of the runes. So this is 9 staves interlocking, and the idea is that it's that understanding of connection and understanding of fate, in that it's constantly unfolding, right? Almost like a tapestry, almost like a weave, right? And I really do believe that. So when I like with synchronicity, I'm not shocked anymore. I'm not shocked when synchronicities and connections and little coinkydinks happen, because they seem to happen all the time. And I really do think that becoming aware of those can be very helpful to us, guiding us through life. Even just to have like an underline of something. This is important, you know. My transition here to Wellingborough, where I am now, was relatively easy. I landed where I'm currently rooming. I got this place within, I don't know, the span of like a week and a half before I even got here. So this was already set up before I went. You know, there were all these little connections that seemed to connect me to this place. And I think it's because this is the most stable place to be for the next 6 months until I figure out where I'm going, you know? Yeah. That's the feeling I'm getting anyways.
Right. And as you get older, I think you, like, when you get as old as me, Ben, and you look at after all those staffs and all the interactions, you see, oh my goodness, and this is where I focus. All of that brought me to this place, and this is where I focus. And then stuff just starts happening. Like you people stuff. I mean, it's not all good. It's not all wonderful. It's not all,
it can't be.
And so, like, is this how you feel, to round up this trip thing and go on to the new book? Is this how you feel about your trip? That even though you might have wanted to stop it from time to time, there were enough things happening that kept pushing you forward? These little things? Or are you just a stubborn little Paddington?
I think it's a loaded question because it assumes a lot. I think, yeah. I would say that there were so many times and other directions I could have gone with this, but I happen to be in this time stream right now. So I happen to be like, and this is where I really do think of it as like an unfolding as opposed to a predestination. I don't know that there is one predestined place for me to head, but I do think that just like driving down the road, there are many, many road signs. Becoming aware of those road signs, you can make good, solid decisions as to the route that you're heading, right? And I think not all of those road signs are mundane. A lot of those road signs are supernatural. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah. We're walking in both, like, I can't remember her name. Women Who Run with Wolves says,
oh yes,
there's no genre magical realism.
Yes.
Life
Pinkola Estes.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It you know, life is magical, like, you know, realism.
Well, it is. Yeah, it is. It is. And I think, you know, I would say that the majority of spiritual traditions teach this. It's just that we get so bogged down in the immediacy of what's going on right now. And particularly in the West, we're very disconnected and we're very individualistic, and we are not...
we don't want to be failures. Like, the worst thing you can do is fail at something, but then you're never trying, you're never, you know, experiencing that failure.
Yeah, and but that pressure of not failing is created and generated by the individualism that we, like, the capitalism that we exist within, right? Because it's this idea that every single individual one of us has to be great and good and powerful and, you know, get all the things and this and all the other, you know.
He who has the most toys when he dies wins. That's how it works. Okay. Okay, so on to, because it's all, I don't need, okay. I could just talk like this forever, Ben. So just give me a moment. So you have a new book coming out in September.
I do. Yes, I do.
And,
yeah.
Of Doves and Ravens, the Witches and Wisefolk of Wales, and the Borders. And the cover is fantastic. I can't seem to get it up right now, but if you come to any of my
Mhm.
sites, I will have that cover up because it is. If you know, they say you can't judge a book by a cover, but even if I didn't know Ben wrote this book, I would be like, I want this book
See if I
because of
can
the
do this here.
cover.
Let's see if I can quickly do this here. Let's see. I should have brought this up earlier. So, of Doves and Ravens. Let's see. Yeah, the cover is phenomenal. So it's through the History Press, which is a local British producer over here, and they focus on local folklore and also history. And Doves and Ravens here, and they have a very, very quick turnover. So they have about an 8-month turnover, which is very, very, very quick in the publishing industry. But it's because, and I've realized this, it's because they expect that a very, very polished manuscript will be submitted to them. So they don't go through the same rounds of edits that like Llewellyn or like Wiser in the Traditions or Moon Books do, right? So I've learned that. Now that I've learned that, now I know the next one. But the front cover is just incredible, and that's what it looks like. You can just about see that there, I'm sure.
It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
And now they're selling
I
it
don't
as
think
a
that's coming up.
hardcover, right?
They are, so I'm really excited about that.
So
It's going to be a
19
hardcover.
pounds
Yeah.
is not expensive, people, when you're getting a hardcover book, because
No,
we're
it would be
looking
about
at
35,
$50 now in
38.
Canada. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
this is yeah,
This
yeah.
is, and you said there's 30 illustrations in there. Did the description
Yeah,
say?
so there's 30 illustrations. Half of those are maps. So how I've designed this is it's encyclopedic in nature, but it's not A to Z encyclopedia. I've designed it instead by place names. So each of the figures, it focuses on, I think, 98 or 99, something like that. Individual witches, magicians, Dunhuspis, the cunning folk, and wizards and other magical folks from Wales and the borders. And so I've designed it so that each chapter is a region of Wales. So you've got North Wales, you've got Mid Wales, you've got South Wales, you've got Pembrokeshire, and you've got the borders. So 5 major regions. And each of those has a map included, which was a fabulous way to learn these stories. I went literally through all of the material that I could find, many of the antiquarian journals and the major like Welsh folklore books from the 1800s and 1700s, and I tried to enter into the Welsh language ones. I don't have Welsh. I'm just going to put my hand up here and say I don't have Welsh myself. I don't speak Welsh. I've tried to learn over the years, so I did have to rely on friends who speak Welsh, or translators where I could. Luckily, the types of stories that I'm focused on, and this is the folklore and the folk tales rather than the historical, are very simple stories. Like they're simple language. Their prose is quite simple, so it was easier to translate. But even then, like I had to rely on friends. But yeah, so the book is an introduction to these individuals, many of whom are very unknown outside of Wales, and so I'm really, really looking forward to sharing. Yeah.
And yet with like pop themes that we might recognize, as you spoke of before, with the demon, the person who, the wizard who beat the devil on the bridge.
Oh yes.
I mean, this
Yeah.
is, you know, in different ways, or anything. You can even think, well, I don't know why that would be, David. Okay.
Yeah, so Dave has asked. I'm guessing the market for his stories will be better in England than the Canadian market, and that's actually not true. There is a very vibrant Welsh diaspora in North America. I'm good friends with Mara Starling, who, if you ever need her on, like, have her on. She's incredible. Love Mara.
Yes, no,
Yeah,
I
she's
have my head in that
great.
direction. Well,
Yeah.
because I don't know if they're in the book. I don't want to spoil her, but
Hmm.
Merlin is said to be from Wales. And so how many people you've been to Renaissance, for heaven's sakes, you made staffs and dressed up as a magician enough for Renaissance festivals, David, to know this is going to play in Canada. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, well, it's one of those things. So it's like, there's a lot of, and again, I will put my hand up and I will say I am not an expert in, the ancient Welsh language literary tradition. I am not. So this book is more about stories than it is about history. But there is a very long history of kind of the Welsh Arthurian tradition, and then the kind of Norman Anglo-European Arthurian tradition, and the two are connected, but also disconnected as well. So there are various different figures that contributed to Merlin, and it is believed by some scholars. Other scholars will argue that it is not the case, and it all depends, right?
It has been said. It has been said. It's how I clarify that, because it can be quite an intense discussion.
Yeah.
Now this book has maps, so I'm thinking that most of these tales are connected to a specific place.
Yes. Yeah. So this is the thing with folklore, is that the vast majority of folklore, up until only recently, only the past 150 years since really the Brothers Grimm kind of came up, vast majority of folklore was connected to place and space, right? So like what the Brothers Grimm did was essentially collect folk tales from around Germany and stripped them of their locality and made them something other. And this contributed to a general feeling that fairy tales exist wherever, that they exist in some other place. But that's not true for the majority of folk tales that those fairy tales were generated from. So, for me, it was very important to connect these stories to the actual locations in Wales. And for me, it was quite a journey because, after me writing this in Canada, after 30 years of not being in Wales, it was quite a journey around the landscape, even in creating and sorting and organizing, researching,
So travel by book.
It was travel by book. Yeah. But this is the thing. Most people, when they read folklore, they're not in the landscape that those stories come from. So a lot of people, kind of going back to what Dave was saying here, right? Most people in North America, in the diaspora, only read about the UK and read about Britain and the stories over here. They don't get to experience the landscape themselves. But then when you're looking at, depending on what story you're looking at, oftentimes a lot of these stories do now exist in an alternate third space. A friend of mine up in Toronto, Brian Walsh, who I love to death, he's a storyteller. He's quite a celebrated storyteller up in Toronto there. And, his personal spiritual practice and his storytelling expertise are connected to Ireland. And he made a very good point, and I'm going to steal it for this conversation, but he made a very good point that when you read the Irish sagas, right, when you're reading the Irish tales like Cuchulainn and like Finn McCool and whatnot, the landscape that those stories come from was heavily forested, because Ireland was heavily forested back then. Ireland isn't heavily forested anymore now. So when modern Irish people are reading those stories,
they see that green grass.
They see the green grass. They don't see the forests that are detailed in the stories. Now, for diaspora Irish people whose ancestors came from Ireland, but who are culturally Irish or Irish Canadian, right? To be able to say, okay, Cuchulainn went into the forest and traveled for dozens of days, whatever it is, right? That isn't just mythical or imaginary, because you can just go up to Muskoka and see the forest that goes for days and days, right?
So that's
it's
interesting.
A lived landscape thing. Yeah, when he said that to me, it was like, wow, that makes so much sense,
That's it. We have to look at the landscape in a historical sense too. There is so much learning that this passion of of folklore, of story. I mean, even like historical fiction. No,
Yes.
it's not true. It's
No.
fiction. But I can look back, and whether it was the burning of a factory
Mhm.
or Coney Island, I can go look back and see actual
Yeah.
newsreels and find out what the real truth, the
Absolutely.
history
Yeah.
behind that. And so it
Yeah.
doesn't hurt. So
No.
how do you this isn't it, because Disney always gets
Mhm.
swatted, but I find it interesting how Disney really made the fairy tales very PG, but reality, many of the fairy tales and folk tales were very scary.
Yes. Yeah.
Why did we do that to a whole generation?
Well, we didn't do that. We didn't do that.
No.
Like that's literally a very like particular context, right? Disney was working within very specific US 1950s laws that tried to reduce the amount of violence on television, this that, and all the other, right? So like he was, the designers and the early people, they were very they were constrained because of those, and I think anti-profanity laws or something like that.
Which they
Yeah,
don't have in
but,
Britain.
right.
No, I'm just-
Yeah, but this, I mean, I mean, look at television in general, right? I mean, how many TV shows, like Alfred Hitchcock, for example, right? A lot of in the 70s, you couldn't show death like that on screen. So like Psycho, the movie Psycho, it's hinted at that he's like slashing at her in the bathtub, but it's never shown because they couldn't show that on television. But somehow that made it even worse because it's
because your
it's like the mind takes
imagination
over.
is so much more. And like the Dick Van Dyke Show, they couldn't be sleeping in the same bed. I mean,
Yes.
it goes back. So we have come a long way, people. I
We
mean,
have come a
in a
long way,
relatively
yeah.
short amount of time. When
Come a long way, baby.
Oh, I thought you were. I wasn't thinking tobacco there. So,
Victoria, that's illegal in the United Kingdom.
Just saying. Yes, and that's something that you Canadians should be aware of too, because we
Yes.
kind of think our laws follow us as well, right? We think, okay,
Well, I
it's
don't.
legal
But,
here. No, you don't. Okay, so I'm talking about. Sometimes I say we. Maybe it comes with the name. I don't know. I'm talking about
royal we.
universal. We, yes, not as in we are not amused, right? So I just want to clarify that. But I do think that back to Dave's question, I do think that, and you probably agree, that takes away the importance of the folklores and the tales, because they are warnings. They are. There's a truth behind them that we don't want to face.
They were warnings.
They were.
And this is where I think it's really important to see folklore and folk tales and fairy tales as continually evolving, right? They were warnings in a time when the warnings were necessary, right? So like, a lot of the legends of like in England here, we have Jenny Greenteeth, or like the spirit, the demons that live in water, right? Now it's very important that we don't go down to the water as kids, because we could be drowned by Jenny Greenteeth. There was a need for that. But then as people began to swim, as those ponds were drained, as people became safer around water and more educated around the water, they didn't necessarily need those stories anymore. So those stories shifted and now exist as like local superstitions or this and all the other, right?
This is true.
So
but
yeah,
I'm going to argue. Can I do that?
Okay.
Is that allowed?
Please do. Yeah.
But in the case of Little Red Riding Hood,
Mhm.
that is still relevant today. Not that it would be Red Riding Hood's fault if she ran into a wolf, but there are still wolves. There are still,
In some parts of the world, right?
in some parts of the world. So, Central Park would be wolves.
Yeah.
But you can also look at it as, if Little Red Riding Hood wants to go to her grandma so bad, Mom, you go with her. Like, they don't necessarily have to be an end of. You can solve the fairy tale thing.
Yeah. I mean, again, it all depends, right? Like, what I find really interesting is how older stories are recreated for the modern. and what new takes. And I love adaptations like that because, again, the adaptations tell us a lot more about the current culture than it does necessarily about the old culture. You know, like what is it? What is it called? The Canterbury Tales. So the Canterbury Tales, very, very well known in Britain here. You know, in the 90s, it was like they had wonderful children's television shows showing the Canterbury Tales stories, and
Yes,
yeah, at least for my generation. I'm not sure if they
yeah.
still teach it in school over here. I don't know, but like generally speaking, like it's well known, right? The characters are well known, and the BBC did a really cool kind of anthology series where they took a lot of those stories and each episode was in the present day. So like the Wife of Bath, for example, who is one of the most notorious and hilarious characters from the Canterbury Tales. She was played by Julie Waters, and she was a soap star who had gone through a string of relationships, string of divorces, and living her fabulous life, right? And it was just like bringing Shakespeare into the modern day. It represents those universal stories and motifs, but in a way that is going to be accessible to the now.
Right.
And I think
right.
that's what folklore is constantly doing, because in every telling of traditional folklore, it is to the skill of the storyteller is to update it so that it's understandable to the people on the ground now, who will then tell that story in that version, and then that version will change. So it's very viral in many ways. It mutates upon each telling.
No, and it is important. And it
Mhm.
does, it takes that, that's just an old story that my mom and dad told, I mean,
Yeah.
even now, I just do this to make Ben laugh, but being as old as I am,
Okay.
I'm focusing for the new. Like I'm relating more to the new than to say the 1970s or whatever
Right.
television
Right.
programs. I don't think you can
Right.
go back to those either.
No. But it's interesting that in our modern popular culture, things keep coming back, right? So, like retro, you see this particularly in horror movies. You see a very interesting thing with horror movies and horror video games, particularly, of things from 70s and 60s and 80s being brought back again by a modern younger audience because it has that retro feel. Like one of my favorite newest video games that I played recently was it was called what was it called? It was called Shack. And basically all it is you show up for a shift in a burger stand, and the previous, I know, right? And it has a very like 70s style kind of like old fashioned burger stand.
Yes.
And your the previous person was killed, like the previous guy who worked there was killed, and so you get a little bit of a story every single time somebody new comes up to order food, and you're basically making food, but it has an eerie kind of silence. You hear the buzz of the cooler. You have these people come, and it's raining, so you get this like lovely weird like horror vibe. And every so often you will see a shadow move, or you will see like just a paranormal experience, and it has a very kind of retro feel to it. So it could be the 1970s, right? I wasn't alive in the 1970s, but like that's a version of modern urban legend in the same way that folklore is.
That's right. People don't understand the storytelling behind video games and the work that goes into that, because there's always a story. Dave is bringing up, and we were talking about this the other day. Little Britain is getting a lot of, if anyone's watched it, it's a comedic show from England. It's getting a lot of, in like the little video reels and stuff, a lot of popularity again. But it was not, it would not be considered very politically correct in today's world. So it will be interesting in a story such as that, if they revive it, how they go about doing that. It's always I mean, there's been several shows that
Mm.
have brought themselves back from what was acceptable. And really, with
Yeah.
comedy, it sort of brings those things into the open
Comedy
for
is
people,
all.
right? It's always advanced. It's always,
Yes.
ahead
Yes.
of the rest of the world and picking up on these things.
Absolutely it is. Yeah. Like, I mean, if you go back to watch really old episodes of Royal Canadian Air Force, and some of the jokes that they said like in the 90s would never be said now. But that was in the 90s. That wasn't now, right?
Yeah,
You know?
no,
Yeah.
you have with it, you have to take everything in context of time, area, what
Yeah.
is
Very
happening. I
much
mean,
so.
which is why I'm not good at editing. I just leave it because it comes out the way it came out, right? I'm
Yeah.
not playing with somebody else's words.
Yeah.
And the way these shows go is too complicated to figure out people's words are. So, of Doves and Ravens is coming out
Doves
on
and Ravens. Yes.
it's coming out in September. And you can get
Yes.
it through History Press. I'll put those links up, and as
Yes.
well as
Thank you.
Watermark and the UK.
Thank
That
you.
place I'm
Yes.
not going to
Yeah.
mention. That book
Well,
provider I'm
so
not going to mention.
which one? Sorry, I'm not
Oh,
sure I'm following you. What do you mean?
it starts with A. Amazon. I'm going to do
Oh,
my
I see.
best
Okay.
to avoid.
Well,
you
to be
know.
fair, I think so. There's going to be a 6-month rollout, so it's going to be debuting here in September, but it could take up to 6 months for North America. So it's not going to be a worldwide thing. So
But if we
Amazon might
ordered
be
it,
the only way.
if we order it from Britain,
I think the only way you'd be able
because
to do it is through Amazon, because the distributor in Britain here wouldn't distribute over there because there's 2 distributors.
okay, so if you
Yeah.
order from there, you can, and it's
Yes.
the postage would be crazy. So, well,
Yeah.
this is the point. You want to make some stands,
Yes.
but it just doesn't work if you're supporting writers and indie writers and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So,
Yeah.
you can't do that. So we'll start looking at that. We'll keep in touch. We'll have you back because one way or the other, I need to get a copy of this book, and and check it out, just because of the cover. Now, so this is the new book coming out, and it gives us lots. Look at what happens. You buy it, you even talk about a book, and all of these things happen. So you're getting to travel around the world. You're
I
getting to think
know.
about all kinds of stuff with this one book. So it's really very cheap for experience, when people complain about prices. Now, the book that we discussed before and has been out for almost a couple of years now is
Yeah.
Ancestral Whispers,
Ancestral.
which is just has some. I'm going to read my review of it because
Yes, please do. Yes.
and on Goodreads, and probably that publisher, that place I don't want to mention. I put wisdom, but because it is ancestral wisdom. It is ancestral wisdom. So my review was: the one inevitability in life is death, leaving some to feel powerless. In Ancestral Whispers, author Ben Stimpson empowers us to maintain relationships with those we love and forge new relationships with those we have never met. By truly getting to know those who have walked before us, we are giving new understanding into who we are as a whole. The healing possible with these ideas on a personal and community level is limitless. The background information given makes the suggestions workable regardless of your family dynamics or spiritual and worldviews. It really is a light at the end of the tunnel. Read towards it. And that's
Thank
it.
you for that.
I need to reread it. No, but because it is very workable, and because it does all of your other work, like, sort of goes through it.
I would say so. Yeah.
Although it looks like you do many, many different things, they all sort of converge into a theory.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so. Yeah.
So, it's like your journey back to home, your original home. There were all of those signs, but you continued that journey back, and it obviously goes with everything else. There's something that you need to find in doing that.
This is the interesting thing. So when I wrote Ancestral Whispers, and I'll be honest, I need to reread it too because there's probably a lot in there that I've forgotten I wrote about. But it's one of those things that I was like, it's the middle of a pandemic. I had this vague idea that yes, in the future sometime I want to go back. I was still pining because I didn't really know where I was going to be, like what I wanted to do, all of this, that, and all the other. And so I wrote this book, and ancestor veneration for me was very much story based because I wasn't in the land where literally my ancestors are buried. But what that did was it forced me to start to see other forms of ancestor, right? To really understand story as ancestor, right? Because we are all products of the stories that we tell ourselves, and the stories of the culture that we exist within informs who we are as well. And it's such every single moment it is an interplay and a relationship and a co-creative relationship. So like, going back to what Robin was saying before about, mass immigration, right? Every single immigrant brings a story and adds to that mass story that we have, right? If we look at, every single community that as a settler community came to North America, whether that was through violence or whether that was after the violence, whether that was through peaceful means or non-peaceful means, whether that was fleeing danger and going into the arms of a place that would be welcoming, or as we see in some parts of the world south of Canada, into a place that is more hostile now to people coming, right? Everybody brings a story, and how those individual stories merge into the greater story and change that greater story is, it's what makes it vibrant and living, right? So, with the ancestral story for me, I had my own story of, oh, I don't belong here, I don't feel this, I don't feel that. But like, where'd he go? Where did Wyatt and Willie go? Oh my god, where did he go? Oh, he's on the bed there. So where's he gone? Oh my god.
Security.
Well, like Wyatt and Willie is the story that defines Wyatt in Ontario, but it doesn't define it totally. And yet you go there and Willie is everywhere. There's pictures of Willie all over the place. He is the genius loci, or she is the genius loci of that place. Now, when I moved up there, I'd, had experiences with Wyatt, and I didn't really spend much time there. But spending there 2 years, my story merged with that place.
It's beautiful. It's
it.
beautiful
Yeah.
up there on the point. And
It is gorgeous.
It really is. And I'm glad you got that time before running away. No.
But I also my story with Wyerton is going into the office, because I was in a shared office space there. I was in a cooperative workspace up there, and going there almost every day, working on my books all of last year. Right, it was a way for me to get out of the house, so I wouldn't drive my parents mad. It was a way of like connecting with other people who were working in that office space, right? Walking around, seeing, the high street, right? And it was almost like a Hallmark movie. Like Wyerton itself is like a Hallmark movie.
No,
right?
it is. Yeah. I can see that now.
Right? But like my story merged with the story of that place, even just for 2 years. And there are tales that will be told about me for a while. Yeah, exactly. So
I bet
that's ancestral. I hope so. Anyways, yeah. So yeah, the ancestral journey.
We don't leave a legacy.
Well, I keep being told how missed I am, so hopefully we'll see. We'll maybe I'll come back and move up there again. I don't know. We'll see.
You don't know what life has become. And I think I'm taking up more of your time, but I was just going to say also
right. This is good.
The experience it's not just about where you come from, but I don't like to say this, but the class system that you come from. Someone who is wealthy has a very different story than someone who had to homestead to get
I don't remember a tornado in Wyerton. I think it might have been further south. I think Port Elgin got a tornado, but Wyerton didn't get one. So
yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, I might have missed it. It might have destroyed the town,
No.
and maybe this is an afterlife. I don't know. Like, is this a delusion? Are we here right now?
That's okay. Personal story, but when we had one run through Font Hill, I was in the bathroom. I came out. We were packing the car to go north, and there was Dave and the kids all on the ground. And I'm like, what did I miss? So I'm quite sure, I'll miss most things in life because
I slept
I'm
through
busy.
the hurricane that came through Barrie back in the 90s. I slept through it. So
Oh my gosh, that
yeah,
was a big
we
one.
survived. That was a big one. Yeah, we were in the we were in Aurelia. We were in the travel lodge in Aurelia back in like 1992 or something like that. We were scoping. My parents were scoping Canada out, and we were on holiday over here. And of course, we don't get hurricanes in the UK, right? Very rare. And suddenly it was like big winds happened. We were and then it all went quiet, and then it was all good again. And my mum was like, what just happened? So one of the staff said, oh yeah, no, we just had a big hurricane come through. Oh, I slept right through it.
Well, that's an alley there. That's a weather alley, like through Barrie and
Oh yeah,
and
it
that.
is.
And I think that one was in the summer, wasn't it? Was it that? Because I seem to
I think
remember
so.
a lot of trailers in that were hit, but not Ben.
Yeah.
Not Ben, who was sleeping.
No. 35 years ago,
good.
Ben slept a good night. Right? So,
He slept a good night.
I slept a good night.
So, yeah, there's some. I don't even know what we've talked about now, Ben. It's just been such a passionate, interesting subject.
Yeah,
It's good. You need to come back, not
I
only
will.
for your
I
book,
definitely will.
and we have time to think about all of these ideas of that it's not really necessary to go home to ancestral home or whatever to find ourselves, because we're really where we're supposed to be at this time. This is who we are.
I think this is the thing, right? I think that a lot of cultures are very privileged that they exist in they happen to still exist in the same places that their previous members existed within, right? And so, ancestral connections in Britain here, right, for people who never left, they just go down to the cemetery. They just go down to the places that their kin existed within, the memories that are shared, right? That same process happens everywhere, right? I would say that this whole idea of, I'm going to be controversial here.
Oh, you can be controversial.
Okay. So Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is the writer of Braiding Sweetgrass, she is fabulous, and she spoke in her book around the idea of being indigenous versus indigenized to a place. Being indigenous to a place is that you are in a living culture that has relationship with landscape and continues and perpetuates, and you are kind of part of that living system, right? Being indigenized is that you still have relationship to a place, but with the knowledge and the acknowledgement that your ancestors did not have relationship to that place. It is not a prolonged relationship, right? It's a new relationship. It's a different relationship, a forever relationship. Yeah, but all settler cultures have this sense of we don't belong here because we conquered it, because our ancestors did very bad things and conquered it. And colonization is a horrific thing. And we are seeing the issues of colonization everywhere in the world right now. There are very, very few countries in the world that have not been colonized by a Western power or by other powers over the centuries, right? So I feel like where a lot of people get mistaken is that they feel like they can't have a relationship to a place and the ancestors that are connected and their ancestors that are connected to that place because the origin of that relationship right now. But going back 300 years, if your ancestors have been in a place for 200, 100, 300 years, then there is enough connection to that place. And not acknowledging that is more damaging, more disruptive, and more traumatic than the original trauma of the colonization. if that makes sense. So saying,
No, it
yeah,
does.
yeah.
And I don't think it's controversial. I think it's interesting that the spiritual world is bringing that to the front.
It's
When a lot of this
controversial to some
came
people.
from that idea came a lot from the spiritual community. At least I saw it more there than in the rest of the world. That some of them haven't even felt that. And so it helps those who are really sensitive, who do not want to hurt people, who are intelligent, who can see how it has happened. It helps them to heal, because it's where do you go?
This is the thing, though. It doesn't help anybody heal, because what happens is, and I've seen it, I've heard it. People will say, oh, well, I'm actually Scottish, or I'm actually Irish, or I'm actually Welsh, or I'm actually English. And it's like, oh, were your parents from there? No, my ancestors from 200 years back were from there. And what happens is people who have that mentality in North America will come to these older countries and will, like in the case of Wales, for example, will come to Wales and expect, and they will expect a certain relationship with the place. And what is the basis of the relationship? Castles, Highland Scottish dancing, right? Having tea and biscuits, right? Going to, like, doing the all of the really shallow things that are
The
just
superficial things.
the superficial
But
things.
is there an aspect of society that can only see, like, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying it as physically their makeup is so that they only see. They don't necessarily feel.
But again, so culture is not genetic. Culture doesn't exist.
Yeah, no. I mean, people all over the world. Like, there's just this is not any culture. This is just different types of people.
This is the thing, right? Like, all the superficial aspects of culture, right? And Canadian culture the same way. Like, Dave in the comment section there said, did he take butter tarts and maple syrup to use as barter, right? Like, I know that's a very Canadian joke, right? Yeah, and that is what a lot of British people think of Canada when they think of Canada. But that's not what being a Canadian is.
No,
really.
no.
Like, we're not going around, eating butter tarts and having maple syrup all the time.
Well, right? Dave would be if his wife didn't tell him not to. But therein, it interests me, being from Canada, or if someone was from the United States, bless them. That there is so much different culture in Canada. Why are you even worried? I mean, Newfoundland to BC, to put it. See, Ben gets lots of laughs. Ben is not here for your rescuing, David. There is so much culture within Canada, and you can see the different sections and how that has happened. Right out to the large Swedish population out west, where they have tales of elves and things in their local communities. Out east, and so I don't understand. You probably feel that as much going from, as in Robin's case, moving from Newfoundland to Manitoba.
This is the thing. I think maybe I'm losing track of our conversation here, but this is the thing, right? We need to understand that those are diaspora versions of those cultures, right? So, like, in the area I grew up in, near Hanover, right? It's a diaspora German culture. It's an offshoot of the culture, right? Same as, like, Quebec, the Quebecois culture is not French culture. France is French culture.
Right.
Quebecois is Quebecois culture. They emerge from the same root. Yeah, you know what I mean. And I think
I don't think you're losing. I don't think you're losing track. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm not explaining well enough. So that is not. That's the idea. If I go back, it will be like that, and you can't go home in any way. And if you've never been that, you were just imagining.
But it's not home to begin with. This is, I think, the point, Vicky, right? This is where it becomes really important to understand, is that The idea that home is actually over there because my ancestors came from over there.
Yeah,
First of all, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, this isn't actually my home here. And when you start to say that about where you're at, you start to disrespect your home. And I say that as somebody who,
okay.
for
I
30
hear
years, for 30 years, I had it in my head that I didn't belong in Ontario. I had it in my head that I was not Canadian. I had it in my head that I did not truly want to be there and belong there. And so I didn't appreciate the relationship that I had with Ontario until now, when I'm like 2 weeks sitting in another country. Like I pine, there's parts of Ontario that I really pine for. There's parts of the relationship with that place that was home for 30 years that I really, really pine for, that I miss. I'm homesick. I only realized in absentia that it was home for 30 years, that I actually did give a shit about Ontario, right? So when people say I'm actually of a Scottish background, I'm actually of an Irish background, and it's actually 2 generations, 4 generations, 10 generations removed, right? What can happen, and this is where the indigenization piece comes in, is that you don't appreciate what's here now.
Right. So you're actually, through your own experiences, in other words, trying to help people to live their lives now.
I'm not. I would say I'm not trying to.
Well,
to
you
do
are
anything.
helping people. Okay. So I will change that to
I'm suggesting to
you are
people.
suggesting.
Right.
Oh, for
Yeah,
heaven's
I'm
sake, words.
suggesting.
I'm
I
going to
know.
say you are helping people to understand and appreciate their life here and now.
I think that
today.
it's a really healthy thing. I think that ancestor work is about understanding that we are parts of vast chains going back into the past. We're part of that lineage, but we can't delude ourselves and say, well, our lineage starts at this point and ignore the things in between, which is really damaging, because as soon as you say, well, my ancestors are actually from over there, even though you have ancestors here, then you can start, like, it doesn't take long to start to say, well, actually, my ancestors didn't do slavery. My ancestors didn't commit genocide against indigenous people. My ancestors didn't do this. And a lot of people do. A lot of people delude themselves,
Dave just thinks you're going through withdrawals for ketchup and dill pickle chips. Now,
you know what? The prawn flavored chips and crisps over here make it up. It's all good.
The important things. No, but what you're saying is I think this is too much. I agree with you. Like, I'm like, we're splitting so much into like labeling ourselves as this or that. And missing as far as nationality goes. And of course, we're doing that because we're trying to find where we belong. If we don't belong here, where do we belong?
But we do belong. We do belong
yes,
there.
I know,
That's the
but
thing,
it's
right?
sort of been suggested.
I know what you mean.
Depending on where you're reading or whatever at the time. So, so we are where we are now, as much as if we, we could have. It's like liking a band. Okay, I'm a so-and-so fan. It's like I live in this class socially, economically. It's like I am religion. It's like, and people have brought themselves down to, except for Thursdays type of descriptions. Like they're so specific that we miss all of those underground things, which are brought up in ancestral whispers. Because it does right down to, I spoke about it then, but the fact that I'm connected to lemon pie, not because it's good, just because it's good, because my aunt always made it up north, and that it holds
And
like
that's
a
living
sacred place
connection
in
there.
my life.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's
So,
exactly it. Yeah. Like,
so
can
am
I
I?
be vulnerable? Can I be
Yes.
vulnerable? Okay.
I won't.
So for a very long time in North America, I felt like I was different, and like I didn't become British until I was in North America. Right now, I'm in Britain again. I'm British, but I can already feel that weight of needing to be like, this is who I am, this is who I am, is dropping away. And that's caused a bit of a crisis for me, because then it's really forcing me to look at, okay, what does this actually mean for me? So, for such a long time, me being Welsh, for example, was a big thing. And in North America, there's only so many pieces of that need to be explained. When I come over here and meet people who are Welsh, who have a different version of that Welsh culture, like who can speak Welsh, who are have an ongoing relationship with the landscape, suddenly it's like, okay, what have I been doing all this time? What is Welsh? What has Welsh been to me, right? And Welsh, like there's multiple different forms of being Welsh, right? But in that sense of, oh, well, my Welshness is not the same as your Welshness because you've had experience of this place for such a long time, that can cause a lot of, that is causing me a lot of issues, right? Because it's really forcing me to be like, okay, I admit, yeah, I have a lot of catching up to do, right? And I think that what I'm feeling now is something that that diaspora people deal with a lot, because it's that sense of, I need to, if I'm taking on this identity of being a Celtic pagan or being a, whatever it is, right? Being a Scots-Irish or whatever, right? And focusing that identity on over here, then it's like that needing to prove that somehow. And all you have is the superficial. You don't have the acknowledgement of the lived identity, right? Right.
So no. And thank you for being vulnerable. Now, may I make a suggestion?
Of course, yes.
I think your next book should be Finding Home. And I think because you're intelligent and you follow the storylines for these things, that you can do a lot to speak to people on this matter. You're just learning this yourself, and it's a big understanding that you've taken on in 2 weeks, right? It's like this has come. So, and in for an example of what you're speaking of, if you are from a Celtic background and you just read the books from that background,
yes,
the maple tree is not in the sacred grove of trees, and it's a very big part of who we are here. So you need to experience that on your own, to learn that on your own, and that is where all of these stories started from. Someone saying, hey, the oak tree has that characteristic, let's put it with on a more practical term.
Yes.
So you are missing out on I just want to say the maple tree. How can you live in Canada and not have a maple tree in your sacred grove?
Right. But there's a lot of people who like out on the prairies that don't have maple trees, right?
Yes, no, it's true.
Yeah.
But
and I don't say that to point like
no, but it is a different area. That's what I said.
Yes.
It's over.
Yeah.
I don't know, because we change, everything. You know what? It's like the story of everybody has all these preparations and everything they do for Christmas. I do Christmas. This is what I do. This is what we've done for years. And I love those stories, probably happening in Wyerton, where, all these strangers get stranded and have nothing for Christmas and make it their best
Actually, it's happened.
Ever.
This past Christmas, it's actually happened. Yeah.
Looking like a Hallmark movie. But isn't that true? You let go of everything and just live with the people you are and experience that and share from all of your backgrounds.
And this is why it's so important for indigenization to happen, as opposed to trying to be indigenous. Because, if bringing in the idea of cultural appropriation is taking from somebody else a heritage that is not yours because it's a sense of belonging. That's really what cultural appropriation is. It is trying to
be something you're not.
Well, it's trying to barge into a relationship of belonging.
Yes.
Right. Where you don't have that sense of belonging. Right. And it often comes from this sense of feeling like you don't have belonging. It's that putting up the blinder and be like, I don't have anything. Well, you do have something. You need to focus on acknowledging what you do have in order to then be able to, again, be grounded, so that you're not, like some people in Southern Ontario sometimes do, and they quite rightly get called out for it, dressing up in deer skins and running around a wigwam and like ridiculous nonsense.
We used to do the spiritual scene with the wands and the staffs and that. So I get what you're saying. It was. I don't know. I haven't been out there lately, so I don't know what's happening on. But at the time,
but that comes from a place of spiritual deficit. right? And like you were saying with the the maple tree, you can have relationship with a maple tree, and that relationship will be different from indigenous people. But by admitting that you have the relationship in the first place, you can then acknowledge that you have a shared relationship with indigenous people who have different relationships with the maple tree than you do, but
Right,
that you
right.
can both share in that enjoyment of having relationship, right?
Well, I mean, the big thing for offerings
Yeah.
for elves is milk and honey.
Hmm.
I give them milk and maple syrup
Hmm.
because that is my connection to this
That
land,
makes
which has
sense. That's a
nothing that
logical
has
adaptation.
that's so yeah, you can. I think it's when people want to make money of it that it really becomes an issue, right? There is that whole um, you know, type of
You're
thing.
not wrong. Yeah, you're
But
not wrong.
and even it's the experience Dave has it apparently some um original b- blood, but
Hmm.
he has not lived the experiences of living in a reservation, of those
Hmm.
things out on the street. So we do not go into that except for this example on the show because it's
Well,
relevant because
yeah.
he was raised a certain way. So, at that time he was into making peace pipes and things with his carving and stuff. But we never ever sold that or went to get a paper so we could sell it because that
Mm-hmm.
was not his experience growing up.
Hmm.
But he could make one
Hmm.
for himself. You know what I mean? We
Right,
can do
right,
that.
right, right, right. Yeah,
So even if you have
yeah.
that bloodline, as they say, it has nothing to do with your experiences, perhaps.
Well, and again, this comes back to the central point that culture does not equal bloodline. Oftentimes people who have a shared heritage will share a culture, but culture is mobile. Same with language. Language is viral. Language mutates. Viral language can be taken up by people, and oftentimes culture and language are often intermingled, right? Because language, there's a lot of culture in the way we speak, right? In the same way that there's a lot of
Oh,
culture in accent, right? Like like 2 days after landing over here, I go into a pie shop, like one of the high street pie shops, and I get myself a sausage roll. And I am talking to a woman, and I just happened to mention, oh yeah, this is my first sausage roll after being in Canada for so many years. And she's like, oh, I just got arrived from Canada myself. Where are you from? I said, well, just outside Toronto in Warrington. She's like, oh, I'm from Ottawa. And in that immediate moment, there was a connection. Even though she was British, obviously had British accent, I obviously had a British accent, but in that moment, we were two Canadians talking about, what it's like being in Britain, right? That is culture. That is shared culture. Even though both of us didn't originate from that place, but we had that experience, right? And
right.
I can almost hear like the cultural scripts suddenly come out as we were both nattering to each other, right? That is culture.
And that
But
shared
having a beautiful
experience,
bloodline.
which culture
Yeah.
you would think would be shared experience, but it's not
Well,
always when
culture is
people
shared
put it in a
experience.
very, people put it in a very
Mhm.
rigid rigid. We just should have called this culture. Speech. No, but
Yeah.
it's really relevant and it's really important in the world because I do think there's a lot of stuff there in this area that needs to be
Yes.
healed. That I,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
being
But there's where disconnection comes in, right? Like I have friends who are down in at Six Nations Reserve. I have friends who were up in Mohawk Reserve up near Kingston, right? And whenever, like they would say, whenever people come who had some sort of a genetic link to Aboriginal heritage, they would be welcomed with open arms, with the understanding that being Indigenous is not about blood. That's a Canadian government thing. Indigeneity and being Indigenous is about community. So if you're not part of a community, then you can't come in and feel recognized. And I'm not speaking for Indigenous people with that, but based on what my friends
that's
have
what you
said.
were told.
Exactly, right? But it's then
Well,
the hard work of making connections with that community, right?
and there was an openness. I hope there still is. I haven't been there. There's been a lot of hurt on both sides. But I know when we were working with the library and we went to we went to one of the things, which was a sacred dance thing that everyone was welcome to. And I was very like, do we participate? Do they want us to participate? I was talking to this one woman, or do we, stand on the side? And she goes, well, they're dancing. I'm sure, she was one of the organizers. They'd like you to dance. And I said, it was sort of a difficult time at the time. And I said, look at us. We're sitting here drinking coffee, eating cookies from Tim Hortons, Timbits, and we're having a grand time. And there's like so many angry people on both sides on the outside that are fighting back and forth. And she said, I think most of the world's problems could be solved by sitting down at Tim's. And that is the thing. We need to talk. Like you were talking today about your experiences, and they're new for you, and you were vulnerable. And I really appreciate that. Like I said, we never stay on topic here.
Well, and if I can just follow that up with something, right?
Yeah.
And I will put myself into a vulnerable place again, right? It's that assumption of belonging which gets people in trouble. And I say that as somebody who assumes or assumed at points that I belonged to a living culture that I became disconnected from 30 years ago, right? So there's been times where I've assumed a certain relationship with people or with place that I didn't have because I'm so out of the loop with it, right? And that was a bit jarring for me, right? Like, in the as I was writing this book on Wales, right? There have been times where, I've had to come face to face with a reality that a lot of what I'm writing about is not my lived life because I was living in Canada for so many years, right? I have a connection to the place because I'm born there, but for the vast majority of it, it wasn't my lived experience. So I needed to really temper my own sense of entitlement and to be very careful. And I've made mistakes with it, right? But that being said, I also know that I can take ownership of that. And I also have ownership of my experience with that place too, because I've worked hard to build that relationship and will continue to build relationship with that place, right? Same with the UK here in general, in England here.
So I want to applaud you for growth. I mean, in the same strength, people can't say they're wrong. I'm wrong all the time, so I've got practice. But people can't say, and I'm not saying you were wrong or whatever in any big way, but that perhaps your perspective has taken a
totally, yeah.
And so you realized that like yesterday, and you're already like
it has been a week of being in the corner in a fetal position.
So, well, you articulate it very well, and I am listening. So we've almost gone 2 hours, Ben. So, do I know Fika is in this like, I don't know, secret place where time has no when we get talking.
Well, it's just you, Victor. I mean, let's just be honest here, Vicky. You have a very disarming way about you, right? Like having talks with you, and when I see like some of these, big name pagan authors, blah blah blah, they're coming on and they're just suddenly it's like like watching Loose Women or watching The View, right? It's just so lovely. So you need to understand that you have a very disarming quality about you. So, and I don't say that to flatter you because I'm being paid $500 after this session.
Ben's doing this for nothing. He needs to learn a lot more in life. And I'm doing this for nothing. So what is it's set up for especially starting independently. I do not know the numbers. All the social networking has changed. Like it's just crazy out there. So my line is, if you want to chat, I'm here on a Thursday afternoon. I can't promise you anything more than that. And Mr. Mark Ryan is coming next week for whatever reason. I don't know. But thank you. But now you've made me vulnerable because obviously I'm not very good with any kind of compliments. So shh. Stop. No, don't get started. Don't give me that therapist look. I have been through this. At 62, there's some things you just give up on and say, you know what? If you do not like the camera on you, you can focus it on other people and give them that encouragement that you're not going to give yourself. Okay. And so I just play fairy godmother and give a voice. And it's fun. So what would you like to add to this? We've been all over the place. Let's round it
Well,
up.
we've covered a lot, yes. So I would add that, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to next time we talk. If you're interested in my books or what I do, benstimpson.com. I can also say that I just landed an agent recently, so I just want to say that I have some big news, hopefully coming in the next couple of months. We're in the talks with some publishers about some other projects that I've been working on, so hopefully I'll be getting it there. And otherwise, yes. People in North America, go and have maple syrup for me. Go and have some really sugar-filled bread for me, because I'm not going to have it here. And,
Butter tarts.
butter tarts. Yeah, go to the where is it? The Midland Butter Tart Festival. Yes.
Why did they were the first ones to start that? Why did they do that? It's dangerous.
No idea. Why does Durham, Ontario have a lobster fest? I don't know. It's nowhere near a lobster.
It's I'm sorry I interrupted, but butter tarts get me all excited. Okay.
They don't have them over here. Never heard of them over here.
They are distinctly Canadian, Canadian thing. So yes, Ben is very busy going all the time, but he needs to come back soon, because we have had such a fun time here, and apparently I'm disarming, so you got to go with that. Now I'm gonna put that down as a referral. Ben says.
There we go.
But yeah, please do come back. I'll put all the links. If people come to Facebook or Blue Sky, I will be putting this stuff up there. Please, people, use Blue Sky more often. I know it's a whole different world we need to get used to, and you don't feel like you belong. But once you get there, it's a good place. So please support that. Okay, Ben.
Okay.
I'm going to say
Thank
goodbye.
you very much.
If you want to schedule another date, just stick around. You don't know a lot of people there. You got a lot of time on your hands.
It's true. Yes, it's true.
So, okay, I'll see you in a minute. Okay. Bye-bye. Okay, so I already put that out, but next week, Mark Ryan of Robin of Sherwood, Black Sails, Hold Fast, the Greenwood Tarot, and more will be joining us. Mark always has a new story to relate, whether from life or one of his projects. I'm looking forward to it. Until then, may your coffee be hot and your story sweet. Thanks for listening, everyone.